All right. For the sake of the mic, the person that has to pass the mic, could everybody try to come up in these first few rows here so he doesn't have to walk so far? We are studying a pamphlet that some of our members put together of what is important and the things that we believe and what makes us different, the things that are important to the gospel message. And so we've been going through all these categories. I think we had like 12 or so. And we've worked our way now down to the one that's called the sacrifice of Christ. And this thing seems awfully loud. And so what we've been doing is we've been taking this in multiple sections. The first phrase was that Jesus was sinless, and we all agreed to that. In fact, I think all Christians would agree with that statement. And we showed verses that prove that he was, Jesus was tempted in all points like we are, yet without sin. And we have a high priest that is holy, harmless, undefiled, and separate from sinners. But then we realized that this concept led people to go in a direction that was contrary to the gospel. And that is, they tried to make Jesus God. And so then we took in this section where we show where Jesus was not God, he was a man, he came in the flesh. And we went through that series of verses. He was made of a woman, he was made like unto his brethren. The Messiah they were looking for was one like unto Moses. So, the Jewish people were not looking for God to come down to save them. They were looking for a Messiah that was going to be someone like Moses. And then we went through well, these are just more verses where, for as much as the children of flesh, partakers of flesh and blood, he also himself likewise took part of the same. What we did was we stressed here was how important the Apostle Paul was trying to hammer a point. In other words, he didn't just say that Jesus was made flesh. He says that for as much as the children, mankind, are partakers of flesh and blood, Jesus also himself likewise took part of the same. I mean, he hammered this point. I mean, there's no way you could not understand what he's trying to say in this verse here. And so then we moved into the actual temptation where we see that this was not a God that was struggling with this. This was a man that was struggling with this. Not my will, but yours. And he was sorrowful, deeply distressed. He said that his soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. And he goes a little further. He falls on his face and he says, "Oh, my Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." So this was not a third part of a God that was going through this. This was a man that was going through this. And so we see that it was his Father. It was his Father that sent an angel to help strengthen him. If he was God, why would he need anybody to strengthen him? And so, and then this shows the agony that he was in. Being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was as it were great drops of blood. So this was the greatest victory that has ever happened in this world. And that is, this man overcame that which was in opposition to God. And he overcame something that no one else has ever been able to do. And so don't diminish his victory by trying to make him God, because he wasn't God. He was a man. So then, again, same verses here. Who in the days of his flesh, when he was offered up prayers and supplications with strong crying and tears unto him. So now notice that Jesus is appealing to someone. And who's this him? Well, we know this him is God. This is his Father. And it was his Father that was able to save him from death. If he would have been God, first of all, he couldn't have died. And second of all, if he was God, he should have been able to save himself. But no, he was praying to the one that could save him. And so concerning the Son Jesus Christ our Lord, which was made of the seed of David, I mean, that was another expectation that the Jews were looking for. They weren't looking for a third part of God to come down to be their king. They were looking for the offspring of David to be their king. And he was declared to be the Son of God with power according to the Spirit of holiness. This is what made him who he really, the victory that he really was, this spirit of holiness that he had, this ability to overcome that which was always in opposition to God, and that is the fleshly mind. Not my will, but thy will. That was what he overcame. And so now this brought us then to this verse. This is where we ended last week. So let's see. Jason, why don't we start with you and we'll work our way around. Read Hebrews 4, verses 14 through 16.
Hebrews 4, verses 14 to 16. Seeing then that we have a great high priest that is passed into the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast our profession. For we have not an high priest which cannot be touched with the feelings of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need.
Okay, so now we've already read this verse, but what this time, instead of us focusing on he was without sin, what I wanted to focus on was he was in all points tempted like we are. Okay, so keep that in mind now when we get to this series of verses. So who's next? Is it Phil? Or who's got the mic? Okay, Phil. Read James 1, 13 through 15.
Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death.
Okay, so now, what does the writer to the Hebrews tells us? He tells us that Jesus is a high priest which cannot be touched with the feelings of our infirmity, but was in all points tempted like we are. So he's making it very clear that Jesus was tempted. Now what does James tell us? James tells us God cannot be tempted. So again, I mean, we've just hit verse after verse after verse that is making it crystal clear Jesus was not God. God cannot be tempted. Jesus was tempted. But now notice, Jesus was a man. And every man is tempted, how? When he is drawn away of his own lusts. So now let's look to see what the Apostle John tells us about lust. So Lisa, you want to read 1 John 2, 15 and 16?
Okay, 1 John 2, 15 through 16. Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world.
So here's the things that we have to be most concerned about. All that is in the world, these three things: the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. And I didn't put these slides in here, but if we would have gone to Genesis chapter, is it 2 or 3? I think it's 3, where Eve is tempted. What does it say that she was tempted? She looked at the fruit and it was good, yeah. And it was pleasing to the eyes, and then there was, and desiring to make. It's got all three of them in there. And so, the fruit was appealing to the flesh, it was appealing to the eyes, and, the serpent said she'd be like the angels. And so, the pride of life. So you see those three things is what caused Eve to be in opposition to God. And so Eve had a choice. She had been told two things. One, you will die. Two, you will not die. Who did she choose to believe? She chose to believe the serpent. Thou shalt surely not die. So when she did that, what did she basically call God? A liar. Okay? But was God a liar? No. So she falsely accused God of not telling the truth. That concept of falsely accusing God is the concept of what is always in opposition to God. And the scriptures refer to it as the diabolos in the New Testament. And the word literally means false accuser. But most of the time, I think twice it was translated false accuser because that's what the word actually means. But almost every other time it's translated what? Devil. Okay? And so now that brings us then to this passage here in Matthew chapter 4. So let's see, Jerry, you want to read verses 1 through 4?
Then was Jesus led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was afterward and hungered. And when the tempter came to him, he said, If thou be the Son of God, command that these stones be made bread. But he answered and said, It is written, Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God.
Okay, so again, we see a very consistent message. Paul tells us Jesus was tempted. Matthew tells us Jesus was tempted. Okay, James tells us what temptation actually, what it is that tempts man. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life. Do you think we're going to see these three things pop up? Because that's what popped up with Eve. And she could not overcome. Now we're going to see these same three things pop up with Jesus. So now, also, I want you to keep this in mind. He was in all points tempted like we are. Okay, so now Matthew tells us that Jesus has been in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. And what was the one thing he did not do during those 40 days and 40 nights? He didn't eat. I don't know if you're like me, but I can, after about 8 hours, I'm starting to think, man, I'm getting hungry, okay? Think about a week. Think about 2 weeks. Think about 3 weeks. 3 weeks is 21 days. He's not even halfway through there yet, okay? A month. Can you imagine going a month without eating? Okay, so you go 40 days and 40 nights and you haven't eaten. What do you think is one of the biggest things that's going to be on your mind? You're hungry, right? Now, if Jesus was truly tempted in all points like as we are, this would have had to have been a tremendous thing on his mind right now. But now see, some people, because they're trying to elevate Jesus, they want to say, well, but he never really thought about that. Somebody had to put that idea in his mind. See, I have a hard time believing that. If I had gone 40 days without eating, I don't think anybody'd have to remind me that I'm hungry. And when he did this, what had just happened? I mean, I'm talking about the day before he goes out into the wilderness. What had just happened? And what he had been given? The Holy Spirit without measure. Now he has the power to do things that no other man could ever do. So now you've got to think about this victory. Did Eve have this kind of power? No. So we've got a temptation that Jesus is going through that no one else has really had to go through. He was in all points tempted like us, but I would say he was even more tempted like us because now he's got power that no other person has ever had. And so he's gone 40 days and 40 nights. I don't think anybody had to remind him, you know what, I'm hungry. And as he's thinking about this concept that I'm hungry, what other thing comes in his mind? I'm sure he's trying to think, I need to get some food somewhere. I am starving. And what does he realize? Yeah, I mean, I don't know how he could snap his finger or whatever, but I mean, boom, he could turn those rocks into food. And so I don't think anybody had to remind him of that either. And so what would you say this was? He was hungry. Would you call that the lust of the flesh? He'd gone 40 days without eating. And so he had to overcome that. And not only did he have to overcome it, but he had to overcome it with the power that he had to be able to literally remedy that situation in an instant. I mean, if any of us had been out there for 40 days, we'd either had to jump in our car and run to the grocery store, or we would have had to, if we had some kind of weapon, go looking for some game or something to kill. But we wouldn't have the ability to immediately solve our problem. He had that ability. So he had to come over. So how does he overcome this? Eve had the choice. I can believe the serpent or I can believe God. I can believe what God said or I can believe what the serpent said. How does Jesus overcome the lust of the flesh?
With the Word of God.
With the Word of God. It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. Not my will, your will. He was constantly focusing himself on this is what the Father wants. This is what the Father is teaching. This is what the Father has instructed. He used his Father's word to overcome this first temptation. All right, who's next? Is it Caleb? Would you read Matthew 4, 5 through 7?
Then the devil taketh him up into the holy city, and setteth him on a pinnacle of the temple, and saith unto him, If thou be the Son of God, cast thyself down. For it is written, He shall give his angels charge concerning thee, and in their hands they shall bear thee up, lest at any time thou dash thy foot against a stone. Jesus said unto him, It is written again, Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God.
Okay, so here again, it refers to whatever this struggle or whatever this temptation was, it was between Jesus and the devil. Now we haven't gotten to this subject yet, and we will eventually, but and so we're not going to get into that. But again, what was it that falsely accused God? It was Eve. Eve said, I don't believe you. I believe the serpent. She basically called God a liar. She falsely accused God. So that which was in opposition to God, that carnal mind that was always my will, not your will, is what was the three things that he had to overcome. It was the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. Okay, so now what does he decide here? He's the Messiah, but does anybody know that? Does anybody believe that at this point in time? John the Baptist, maybe a couple of Peter and Andrew, or a few, but not very many. All right, so, and he's going to end up this horrible death. A lot of bad things are getting ready to happen. It's kind of like, if I could just make this crystal clear to everybody, maybe it would all go away. And everybody would want me to be their Messiah or whatever. And so he gets this thought about, if I got up on the highest point of the temple and jumped off in front of everybody, the angels are going to save me. And so what was this? What kind of a lust was this here? Wouldn't you say this was the lust of the eyes? Because now people are going to be able to see that he was the Messiah. And also think about, he was out, where was he? He was in the wilderness, right? Well, now all of a sudden, he's up in Jerusalem. And now how in the world would that have happened if we're talking about an individual here? No, this is all going in his mind. This is all the things going in. Yeah. It could be. I think the next one's even stronger on that one. But anyway, you can see all three of them are going through. But so if he was in the wilderness, then how did and this was an outside tempter, how did he all of a sudden get on the pinnacle of the temple? I mean, that would have been a miracle right there in itself. So all this is going through his mind, and he's coming up with this concept, I could maybe bypass some of this stuff. Or maybe instead of me preaching for 3.5 years, I could do it just in like 30 seconds for people. You've got all this stuff going through him. So how does he overcome this? It's written. Again, he is relying on God's word. All right, so now we get to the third one. Daniel, are you actually next? Why don't you read that, Matthew 4:11? Or actually, that's a bunch of verses before, that whole series there.
Again, the devil taketh him up into an exceeding high mountain, and showeth him all the kingdoms of the world, and the glory of them, and saith unto him, All these things will I give thee, if thou wilt fall down and worship me. Then saith Jesus unto him, Get thee hence, Satan, for it is written, Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve. Then the devil leaveth him, and behold, angels came and ministered unto him.
So now we've got him on this high mountain. So what is, Jesse, you probably know this, what's the highest mountain in the world? Everest. Okay. Is this where he was? No. If he was out on Mount Everest, would he be able to see all the kingdoms of the world? So there's no way this is literal. There is no way that Jesus is sitting here talking to somebody here. This is all going in his mind. And all of a sudden, Jesus sees, I've got the power. I can call on 12 legions of angels, immortal angels. There's no power on this earth that could stop me. I could just start ruling the world now. So in my case, Jesse, I would say that's the pride of life. But, I wouldn't argue over. But those are the three things that yeah.
Lust of the flesh and the pride of life to show up in whatever we are struggling with. I think in each of these you see a clear example that all three of them are almost interspersed to a certain degree for how deep it is. And I think it's extremely interesting, the idea of going to a high mountain. As Jesse just said, you'd only be able to see clouds. So the proverbial idea of, I see Jesus literally looking at Scripture and arguing to Scripture versus to prove a point, right? Like we see the one point where he is thinking about the idea of, well, as the Son of God, I will be able to do whatever and God will protect me. But then on the same side, I should not tempt him because no, you should not tempt the Lord your God. And then here, I kind of see him almost thinking about Nebuchadnezzar's image. Seeing that image of out of the destruction of the entire nation, the feet will come this giant mountain that will rule over the entire earth. I see him looking at that verse, seeing him see that, and seeing how he could have the glory and do this all right now.
Yeah, and he could either do it his way, or he could do it God's way.
Right.
Doing God's way is going to be a lot longer period, and he's going to have to go through a whole lot more bad stuff, But if he did it his way, he could do it real quick and easy. So, yeah.
What did Joseph do when he was tempted by Potiphar's wife?
What?
That was a question for you. He fled.
Okay.
He fled. Okay. There are numerous passages.
You're right. He did. He ran.
Yeah, there's numerous passages in the New Testament say, flee lewdness, dearly beloved, flee from idolatry, to Timothy, but thou, O man of God, flee from these things. Flee also youthful lusts. So you have this repeated exhortation to flee from temptation. What you've got there, if this devil is literal, you have Jesus actually following the devil to the pinnacle of the temple. You have Jesus following the devil to whatever mountain.
Yeah,
So this actually is contradictory to the scriptural instruction to flee from idolatry, flee from sin. Here Jesus is actually, if it's literal, following and being led into sin, which it just doesn't square with our understanding of Jesus.
I mean, that's very interesting, because the very next point I was getting ready to make is that when you make this some person, because, I mean, we all know it wasn't a fallen evil angel that was doing this. So if you make this some person, first of all, it diminishes Jesus in the points that Phil was making, but it also diminishes Jesus in the fact that, was there any human that could have said, you bow down and worship me and I will give you all of the kingdoms of the world? Was there a human that could do that?
Caesar, if we got to think of the world, in Bible times, the world would have been Mediterranean region. And that would be the world. You can read in the New Testament about how all the world came to be baptized of John and so forth. The term world is referring to the Mediterranean region. There would be one person who had that power, which would be Caesar. And if you know the intertestamental period, like Herod's father, and even Herod himself, and even two of the Maccabees' grandkids, they all went to Herod. They all went to Rome to get Caesar to intervene. In the case of Antipas, and in the case of Antipater and Herod the Great, their kingdoms were given to them by Caesar. So there would be one person, and that would be Caesar. We just have to think a little bit smaller. We think of world today, the entire globe orb, but the world would have been Mediterranean region, and the entire region there would have been controlled by one person, and you would have to go. In fact, there's even a parable that says someone went into a distant land to receive a kingdom. Remember that parable?
Yeah.
And then he came back. I don't remember if that was about the servants or the talents, but that would have been common. If you were going to obtain a kingdom, one person you'd have to go and get permission from to get that land or your power. If you were a friend of Caesar, you're making yourself to be a king. You're opposing Caesar. So there's one person only who has that power, other than God, in that day would have been Caesar.
And is that the kingdom, though, that Jesus was wanting? He wasn't wanting Caesar's kingdom.
Well, you have to start.
Yeah, right.
If you're going to start
Right.
stone starts out as a little stone, fills the earth, you have to start somewhere. So why not start in the Mediterranean region?
But Jesus, the power that Jesus had was so much greater than what Caesar had. That wasn't even, to me, a temptation. I mean, Jesus literally had immortal angels that he could have called on
But if
to.
you were to do it the simple way,
Yeah.
kind of pull the temple, like, this is going to be simple. I don't have to go through 3 years.
Right.
I don't have to be crucified. The same thing would be here. If we're going to have a kingdom, if you're going to be a king of the earth, the simple way would be start with Palestine and get, I'll replace Herod. I'm going to start here in Palestine. And Caesar would have control over the power to grant a kingdom or rulership in the land of Palestine. So you start there.
Yeah, I just think, what I think Jesus was struggling with is that he literally had the power himself. He didn't need to ask somebody, to give me the kingdoms. He had the power to do it himself. He could call on those legions of angels. So that's what he overcame. Walter, did you have something? Okay.
Yeah, if I could make a comment. I see this more in the setup of Adam and Eve. So in this sense, the first Adam was confronted with all these same issues through his wife. So, and she hasn't been named Eve yet, but his wife comes to him and tells him basically all these things. It's good for food, we're gonna get all this power, it's gonna be great, and
like
things
the
are gonna get
angels.
elevated. Now, Adam's decision was, now God directly told him about this, and so the woman didn't get it directly from God. She got it from Adam.
Right.
And so it's the same, and of course Jesus had already talked to his father way before this, even probably at age 12. He's having communication with his father. So the issue facing Adam is not much different than what we see here in the wilderness, in the sense that, yeah, you can control all this. Now in Adam's decision, he wasn't deceived, but he still did it.
Right.
He still, and in essence, what you said before, Eve, the woman was basically saying to Adam, you lied also. God didn't tell you this, that we were going to die. But he's an eyewitness that God told him that. That's the same sort of issue that Jesus, God has spoken to me, and he's telling me this isn't true.
Okay. All right, Walter?
Okay, so what I've been thinking about for some time on these is I agree with the three aspects of what's going on here, that he's answering, if you will, the serpent in the garden. But if you notice the first two, it begins with the question, if you be the Son of God. And these first two temptations are centered around that idea. Prove you're the Son of God. If you're the Son of God, that's a doubt. You can imagine if Christ is fighting against these temptations, like, I know I'm the Son of God. I am the Son of God, but these people keep saying I'm not. And then the mind says, well, if I did these things, I could prove I am because I have the power to do that. And then when you get to the last one, it's like, yeah, I am the Son of God. I know I'm the Son of God because that's what he said. Then if I use the power to do this, then it'd be obvious, right? So he's fighting stuff at a level that we couldn't even begin to comprehend, except in the simple day that we have. The lust of the flesh, the pride of life, and all those things. We identify with all of it. He did too. But his temptation was on such a higher level to have to deal with these things. Anyway, that's what I noticed there.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And, I'll ask you this question, is that which is harder to overcome? When somebody says, how about you eat this chocolate cake or whatever, or else you're sitting there saying, man, that chocolate cake looks fantastic. Which of the two is, harder to overcome? Something that's coming from inside or for somebody else? You might not even, like lemon pie is not really, I eat it, but I don't really crave it. If somebody said, you eat that lemon pie or something, that's not really much of a temptation. But when it comes from inside, that's the real temptation. And that's what I think we have to. Yeah, if it was cheesecake, even somebody mentioning cheesecake might give me a problem. When you're desiring something, that's a much stronger thing to overcome than when you just have somebody suggest it. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that at this time there were other kingdoms other than Europe. There was the Han Dynasty. Emperor Gang Wu was really gaining power in 25 AD. And then in the Americas, there was no Aztec king, but the Aztec Empire, as it's known, 4 centuries later, with Montezuma II. So, I think Jesus, although he never spoke of it, knew a lot more than he talked about because it wasn't relevant to his current mission. And I think he would have been aware that there was a lot of things going on earth that the common European or Mediterranean man might not have known.
Yeah, I agree with you. Jesus knew the intent of God was all the earth. The entire earth was going to be filled with his glory. So I think that's what when he's talking about all kingdom, he's talking about the whole earth. Yeah. Okay. Turn it on. Push the button.
Question.
Okay.
So the devil is taking him up to a high mountain. So we're saying the devil is a false accuser. Okay, but then it says, and the devil saith unto him, and all these things I will give you, if that will fall down and worship me. If this is going on in Jesus' head, who is the me?
The I and the me is Jesus.
So he's going to say, I'm going to fall down and worship myself?
Right. My will, not God's will.
That's what that means?
That's what I think it means. I think he's saying, look, I can do my thing. If I worship myself rather than God, I can call these angels and do my thing here. I think right now he's struggling with, am I going to do God's will or am I going to do my will? And that's what he's struggling with.
Caesar, one of the temptations the religious leaders brought to Jesus was, do we pay taxes to Caesar or not? And he said, show me a coin. Mm-hmm. And the ultimatum was, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and render unto God that which is God's. So you have the struggle in that particular temptation between bending the knee or subjugating yourself to Caesar versus God. Mm-hmm. So I still think this works well if this temptation is coming in his mind, like, if I want to short circuit this, I want a kingdom really quick, I go to Caesar, but if I'm going to go to Caesar, what's the first thing you're going to do is bend the knee,
right, yeah.
and prostrate yourself before Caesar. So I can see where this still works with this being a temptation of of going to Caesar, going through the regular political process of obtaining a kingdom in that day, you would have to go and bend the knee and worship Caesar. And we know later on in the first century, you had Caesar worship. You had to, offer this pinch of incense to Caesar and view him as a god.
Right.
So Caesar is, and he has been called God. Augustus at that time would have been called the Son of God because Julius Caesar was deified as a god. So you do have this worshiping concept with Caesar. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. I just think that, what do you think the chances that Jesus would think in my mind, if I go to Rome and get an audience with Caesar and bow my knee to him, he'll just give me all the kingdom. I mean, I think what Jesus is saying, I've got the power myself to do it. Right. Right, yeah.
So again, when we think of the world, we have to think from a biblical standpoint, not, the entire globe.
Yeah, and actually, we were going to just blow through this. I didn't really think we'd spend our whole time on this, but anyway. All right, so who's next? Who's the last person that read? All right, Holly, you want to read Hebrews 2:7-9?
Thou madest him a little lower than the angels. Thou crownest him with glory and honor, and didst set him over the works of thy hands. Thou hast put all things in subjection under his feet. For in that he put all in subjection under him, he left nothing that is not put under him. But now we see not yet all things put under him, but we see Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels, for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, that he by the grace of God should taste death for every man.
Okay, so now we see that temptation that Jesus had to do it quickly, instead of him doing it his way, he did it God's way, and now that's where he is. He was made lower than the angels, but he has now been crowned with glory and honor. God has set him over the works of his hands. Thou hast put all things in subjection under his feet. For in that he hath put all in subjection under him, he left nothing that is not put under him, because of the victory that he did. And then it says, but we see Jesus was made a little lower than the angels for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, but he, by the grace of God, should taste death for every man. Yeah, Walter?
Just real quick. The high mountain, it echoes Moses standing in a very exceedingly high place, and God says, this is what I shall give unto you, all of this land, it will be yours. So Christ is being taken to an exceeding high mountain, whether it's like Job or whatever, for the same thing. All of this kingdom that you're desiring, the kingdom, the promise, if you do this thing, it's yours, easy. So, but no, it's not. And so I think that's what it's all about. Law versus Christ. Christ overcomes the law that says, it's been promised to you, it's given to you. But to take it and possess it, you have to go through the way of God to do it.
Yeah, I think it was God's will versus my will. All right, so now what we wanted to do, we wanted to focus back on this. Jesus was sinless, but it was God that raised him from the dead. God that gave him immortality. God gave him all authority in heaven and on earth. God set him as the mediator between God and men. And so, actually, this is, I guess this is a good place to stop. What we're going to see here is that what God intended Adam to do, and he didn't, Jesus did. And Jesus had much, Jesus, when Adam was created, what was the world? How did they describe the world? Very good. Did Adam have this carnal mind that he was wrestling with when he was created? No. Did Adam have power without measure that God had given him? I mean, we see that the deck was stacked as positive as possible with Adam, and the deck was stacked about as negative as you could get with Jesus. One failed, one overcame. But which one failed? The one that had everything going for him. The one that was in probably, he had the carnal mind. He had, the earth had lost a lot of its goodness, all that kind of thing. So we're going to see that Jesus accomplishes something much greater than what Adam was supposed to do. So we'll stop there.